Hey you guys, and welcome back to a new week of What's for Dinner. I'm really excited to share these meals with you guys, but first I have a question for you. So I am just curious whether you guys like longer What's for Dinner videos better or shorter What's for Dinner videos better. So I could make them around 10 minutes long, or I could continue to do them around 15 to 20 minutes long. So just let me know down below in my comments. It will really help me out, and I'm sure it will help you guys out just to see whether you guys like longer videos or shorter videos. You know, I'm just always trying to improve. But anyways, I hope you guys had a wonderful week this week. And if you are new here, I'd love to have you over at my channel. So go ahead and subscribe down below the video. But let's go on to this week of meals. To get us started off today, we are making German pancakes. I actually got this meal idea from my friend Caitlin. Her channel is Living That Mama Life, so thank you for this recipe. Anyways, I will have her channel linked down below, but to begin, I have my 9x13 baking dish right here, and I just put about 5 tablespoons of butter in it, and I just set it in the oven while it was preheating to 425 degrees. Now I'm just going to be cracking my 6 large eggs into this glass bowl. I'm actually going to be using my blender for this recipe, but you simply don't have to use your blender. You could use a food processor or just whisk this by hand, but I just find it is easiest to use my blender. I just added the 6 eggs in there along with a cup of milk, cup of all-purpose flour, a dash of salt, and then a teaspoon of some vanilla extract, and then I just blended this all together to combine. And then I just pulled my 9x13 baking dish out of the oven, and then the butter was already melted, and then I just poured that batter in it and set it into the oven to bake. And here it is out of the oven. I just sprinkled some powdered sugar on top. This was super good. We kind of had it for a Sunday breakfast, and I just served it on top with some syrup and some berries. I know I don't have it shown here, but it was so good. For this night's dinner, I just made some baked Parmesan crusted pork chops. To begin, I have a bowl right here, and I'm just going to be cracking in 2 large eggs to that bowl. And then from there, I'm going to be adding in about 3 tablespoons of some whole milk. And then for the seasonings, I'm just going to be adding about 1/4 teaspoon of some black pepper, along with some garlic salt. For the garlic salt, I'm probably going to be adding about 1/2 teaspoon of that. And then I'm just going to whisk this all together. Over to a separate plate, I'm going to be adding about a cup of some panko breadcrumbs to that plate. This is Italian style panko breadcrumbs. You could add any type of panko breadcrumbs you guys like. I just love the Italian style ones. And then I'm going to be adding in 2/3 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. And then for the seasonings, I'm going to be adding about a teaspoon of lemon pepper, teaspoon of onion powder, and then 1/2 teaspoon of some Italian seasoning. And then I just kind of mix this up all together. To begin assembling these pork chops, I just sprinkled them with some garlic salt on each side, and then from there, I just dipped them into the egg mixture and then dipped them into the panko breadcrumb mixture and then set them on my wire rack on the baking sheet. I did want to let you guys know I did use the wire rack, like I said, and put it on top of the baking sheet. The reason I did that is just because it will get your pork chops a little bit more crispy, but that is just unnecessary. You really don't need to do that if you don't have a wire rack, but that is just what I did. Now that my pork chops are completely coated in the breadcrumbs, I just sprinkled about 1/4 cup of some melted butter on all of these pork chops and then stuck them into the oven. Here's my plate all plated up. Those pork chops were so good. They were definitely not dry. I tend to dry out my pork chops all the time, but these were perfect. I just served it alongside of some brown rice and quinoa, and here's Brinley's plate. And then I also made a side salad to go alongside. This was a really delicious meal. For this night's meal, we made the ultimate cottage pie or shepherd's pie, whatever you prefer to call it. To begin, I am just chopping up 3 carrots into small pieces. This recipe actually only called for 1 carrot, but I do like to sneak some extra vegetables in whenever I can. I'm also going to be chopping up 1 white onion into small pieces as well. Over to my skillet, I have a little over a pound of some ground beef right here, and I just broke it up, and I'm seasoning it with a little bit of some salt and pepper, and then I'm just browning this and cooking it completely through. Now that my ground beef is all browned up, I'm just going to be adding in our vegetables, the carrots and the onions, along with some minced garlic. And I just cooked these together for about 5 to 8 minutes. I let those carrots get nice and soft. Now that our carrots are completely soft, I'm just adding in my cup of frozen peas, followed by my cup of frozen corn, and I kind of just stirred those all together. Now to make this shepherd's pie have a lot of flavor other than, your typical shepherd's pie that doesn't have very much flavor, I just added in about 1.5 cups of some beef broth, followed by 1/4 cup of some tomato paste, and then from there I'm adding in 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard, 1 tablespoon of some cornstarch, and then for some added flavor I added in 2 teaspoons of dried thyme, and then I mixed this all together and I let it simmer all together once again for about 5 minutes. Now that everything is cooked through, I just pulled out my large casserole dish and poured this into it. I did want to let you know though that this casserole dish was a little bit too small, so if you didn't make this recipe, go ahead and make it in your 9x13 baking dish. And then on top of that, I just added my mashed potatoes. This is just your typical mashed potatoes I made on the stovetop. I believe I used about 5 or 6 russet potatoes. We do like potatoes in this home. And then on top of all that, I just added some sharp cheddar cheese and stuck it into the oven. Here is my shepherd's pie all plated up. This came out so good. I didn't pair it along with any sides just because it was a pretty well balanced meal. Like I said before, this was a delicious meal. Even my little daughter loved this one. This one is a great family friendly meal and adult friendly. It's everybody friendly in my opinion. For dessert on that night, I just made these no-bake raspberry cheesecake bars, and I just thought I'd show you guys how I made them. This recipe is so good. So onto my saucepan on the stove right here, I'm just pouring in 2 cups of raspberries. These are frozen raspberries. You could also use fresh. And then I added in 2 tablespoons of sugar and then 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. Then I just mixed this all together and let it melt down. Mine was a little bit too thick, so then I added in 2 tablespoons of some water. So that is what you do if yours is too thick. But here is the consistency, what it should look like. I just let it cool for about 15 minutes. Well, I started on my graham cracker mixture. So for my graham cracker mixture, this is just kind of like the graham cracker crust, I guess you could say. This is just 1 sleeve of graham crackers that I pulsed up in my little mixer right here, and then from there I'm adding in my butter. This is just 5 tablespoons of melted butter along with 2 tablespoons of some brown sugar, and then there is what it looks like. Now I just pulled out an 8x8 baking dish, and I'm lining that 8x8 baking dish with some parchment paper. The reason I'm doing that is just so it is easier to take these cheesecake bars out of the 8x8 baking dish when they are all done and ready to eat. So then I just poured in that graham cracker crust in there, and I'm just patting that down so it is all even everywhere. Now that this raspberry mixture is completely cooled, I'm just going to be pouring it onto our graham cracker crust. I did want to let you guys know though, it is really easy to pull up the graham cracker crust while you're trying to spread this raspberry filling out as even as possible, so just be aware of that while you're doing this. To begin on the cream cheese filling, I'm just going to start on the heavy cream mixture first. All it is 1/2 cup of heavy cream whipped to firm peaks. If you don't know how to whip something to firm peaks, seriously, all you do is get your little electric mixer out and mix it really well for about 5 minutes, and then it will look like that. The next thing you're going to do for your cream cheese filling is you're going to put your 8 ounces of cream cheese at room temperature in your bowl, along with your 1/3 cup of sugar and then your tablespoon of vanilla extract. Then you're going to mix this really, really good. You want to make sure you mix this up really good, like I said, because nobody wants, a lumpy cheesecake, because we've all had lumpy cheesecakes before and they're just not pleasant, so make sure it is nice and smooth like this. The next step I'm going to be doing is combining the heavy whipped cream topping along with the cream cheese, and you're just going to fold this all together. It is seriously that simple. Now that was folded together nicely, I just plopped it on top of our raspberry crust filling, I guess you could call it. And then I just spread it out as even as possible. Of course, it's going to be a little bit difficult to spread it out, but just, try to do it as even as possible. Then I just set this in the refrigerator to refrigerate for about 2 hours so that cream cheese mixture gets all set up. Here we are about 2 hours later. I just have about 3 ounces of dark chocolate chips and 3 tablespoons of butter, and then you're just going to melt this all together on the stove. Next time I do this, I actually want to try it with some coconut oil instead of butter, so if you do try it with coconut oil, just let me know. I would love to hear how it turns out. But then I just spread this on top of our cream cheese filling as even as possible. You do want to make sure that chocolate is completely cooled before you spread it out on the cream cheese filling. As you guys could see, mine was still a little bit warm, but despite that, it still turned out great. I did refrigerate this for another 30 minutes just so that chocolate hardened, and this came out so delicious. Honestly, this is one of my favorite desserts of all time now. This one is definitely for the books. I loved it. I think you will love it as well. I do want to apologize for how dark it is right now. I did film this pretty late at night, but this was a really good dessert. For this night's dinner, I made some homemade pizza, and this is actually a brand new homemade pizza dough recipe, and I'm excited to show it to you guys. So I did make it with sausage, so I'm just cooking up a pound of some sausage right now. I did want to apologize to all my meatless meal friends out there. I did totally skip out on a meatless meal for this week, and like I said, I am sorry, but next week I am coming up with a great meatless meal for you. Now we're going to begin on our dough for the pizza. So I'm just adding 3 cups of some all-purpose flour to this large bowl. This is actually a no yeast pizza dough recipe. You could typically find no yeast pizza dough recipes on my channel. That's just because I am so last minute on making dinner. I never have like an hour or 2 to spare letting dough rise. So that's why I never add yeast to my pizza dough recipes. But anyways, this is a great dough recipe. I just added about a tablespoon of some olive oil to my bowl, along with a half a teaspoon of salt, and then a tablespoon of some baking powder, and then a cup of some warm water. And then I just mix this all together. The best tool to mix with is your hands, so I just mix this up with my hands. Over to my floured surface, I'm just going to knead this for about 5 minutes. Also, if your dough is a little bit too thick or too watery, just add more water or more flour until you kind of get it into a pizza dough consistency. I'm going to be very upfront and honest with you. This was very difficult to roll out with my rolling pin, as you could see. So I ended up having to kind of flatten it out on my pizza tin right here with my hands. So keep that in mind if you do go to make this recipe. This pizza dough is absolutely delicious and very worth making, but just make sure you get it out nice and flat because nobody likes a super thick doughy pizza dough. Anyways, so now I just poured some marinara sauce onto my dough, and then I'm just gonna add my toppings. So for my toppings, I'm just adding mozzarella cheese. You'll see this mozzarella cheese is kind of frozen, so it was a little difficult to work with. And then I added some mild cheddar cheese because cheddar is good on anything. And then some Italian sausage, some of that sausage we cooked up. I only added half of that, and then with the other half of the sausage, I actually made it for breakfast burritos the next morning, and then some pepperoni, and then some fresh basil leaves. And then for my seasonings, I always add some pizza seasoning to the top of pizza. I always just think it gives it some added delicious flavor. And then you guys could probably guess the last part. I'm going to add some Parmesan cheese and stick it into the oven. Here is the pizza out of the oven. This was sitting out for about 10 minutes because my husband was a little bit late home from work on that night, so that's why it's not all ooey and gooey and cheesy, but this was still so delicious. I just made some homemade ranch for the side and I paired it with a big old side salad. This was such a good pizza recipe and I love homemade pizza. I just can't get enough of it. For this night's dinner, we made some chicken bacon ranch pasta, and this one is a must try for sure. To begin, I just boiled up about 4 cups of some shell noodles into some boiling water. You could also use some egg noodles. That would be delicious. I want to try it with that. And then I just drained them. Onto my large saucepan, I just have some olive oil on it. I'm just adding 1 chicken breast. I did slice this chicken breast thinly in half. I just prefer my chicken breast like that. And then I seasoned it with some salt and pepper on each side, and I let that completely cook through. Once that was cooked through, I just put it on a separate plate. Now for my bacon, I have about 5 pieces of bacon. If you know me, you know I get my bacon at Costco always. You could also just use turkey bacon. That would be great for this recipe as well. I'm just going to be cooking this bacon up right now though. Now that my bacon is completely cooked to the way I like it, I just removed it to a separate plate lined with some paper towels to drain the grease. And then with the grease onto the same skillet, I didn't remove any of the grease on my skillet. I added 1/3 cup of some all-purpose flour, and then I just whisked that oil and flour all together to combine. And once that was whisked all together, I started adding in my milk. All the milk is 3.5 cups of milk. You want to make sure you be careful. You don't want to add the milk all at once, or this recipe might not turn out great. It's going to turn out a little bit clumpy. So just add it in slowly and just continue to whisk it until the flour and the milk and everything is incorporated well. Now that our little sauce is completely smooth, I'm going to be adding in my ranch. You could add 1 packet of ranch, or you could add about 2.5 tablespoons of the stuff in the big container. That's what I had, and then I just whisked this all together. Now I'm just going to be adding in about 1.5 cups of some shredded sharp cheddar cheese, and you're just going to whisk this all together again until everything is well combined. Now for my chicken breast, as you see, I'm just cutting it up into small bite-sized pieces like this. You could cut it up smaller or larger. And then I just added it into a large bowl along with my shells that I drained. And then I'm adding in all of my bacon except for 2 pieces. The 2 pieces are for garnish on top. And then on top of that, I'm just going to be adding in our sauce. And then I'm just going to stir this all together just so everything is mixed well. Now I have my large casserole dish right here. You could easily do this in a 9x13 baking dish if that's what you prefer. I just poured that cheesy shell mixture in there, and then on top of that I'm just sprinkling it with about 1 cup more cheese. You could really use any cheese you prefer. Colby Jack would also be delicious. And then I'm just going to be breaking up our remainder 2 pieces of bacon and sprinkling that on top as well. And then I'm going to bake this into the oven until it gets nice and cheesy. Here it is out of the oven, all cheesy and delicious. To be quite honest with you guys, I was very skeptical about this recipe first. I just didn't know if it was going to turn out, but this came out so good. I'm definitely going to be making it again here soon. I served it alongside of just some steamed peas. This one is a must try for sure. I think you guys would all enjoy this recipe. And that is a wrap of this week's What's for Dinner. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got plenty of meal inspiration. I hope you guys have a great week this week, and if you are new here, I'd love to have you over at my channel, so go ahead and subscribe down below the video. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.